Good morning. Today we are starting with chapter 21, Neural Control and Coordination. Now this chapter is related to the coordination where the various processes in which two or more organs they interact and complement the functions of one another. When we do physical exercise, the energy demand is increased and the muscular activity is increased, supply of oxygen is also increased. So all these, how they are related to respiration, heartbeat, increased blood flow, and the activities of the nerves, lungs, heart, kidneys, when they return to their normal conditions. These are all these activities, how they are coordinated. They are coordinated with two types of systems. One is neural and another is endocrine system jointly. So in this chapter, we'll be covering the topics related to the nervous system, that is neural system. Human neural system we'll be studying in detail. Neuron as a structural and functional unit of neural system. Generation and conduction of nerve impulse. Transmission of impulse. Central nervous system, that is forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. Reflex action and reflex arc. Sensory reception and processing. The structure of the eye and mechanism of vision, structure of the ear and the mechanism of hearing. Now, in the introduction part, we know that coordination is the process through which two or more organs interact and complement the functions of each other. As we have discussed the examples like doing physical exercises, energy demands, maintaining muscular activity, supply of oxygen, increased respiratory rate, heartbeat, increased blood flow, all these activities, they need to be coordinated. And neural system provides an organized network of point-to-point connections for a quick coordination. There is another system which controls the various activities of the body in a coordinated manner, and that is the endocrine system, which provides chemical integration through the hormones. So let's begin with the neural system. A neural system of all animals is composed of very highly specialized cells which are called as neurons. Neurons you all are already familiar with. Neurons generally detect, receive and transmit various kinds of stimuli. You know what are stimuli? These are the environmental factors through which the response is given by the organism. So the neural organization is very simple in the lower invertebrates. Lower invertebrates, when we talk of Hydra, we find that it is composed of a network of neurons. You can see here. Okay, they composed of network of neurons. This is a nerve net throughout the body. And the neural system is better organized in the insects. When we talk of insects, the neural system is better organized. Here they have a small brain. Okay, you can see here brain. So insects, they do have a small brain. And along with the number of ganglia, okay, they have a number of ganglia in the body. Ganglia is a collection of nerves through the neural tissues. And the vertebrates, actually they have, when we talk of higher vertebrates, they have a very, you can say, a very well developed neural system. Okay, that will be discussing in detail related to humans in this chapter. So when we talk of human neural system, it is divided into two parts. One is central nervous system and another is peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cord, and this is actually the place where the processing and the control of the information takes place. And peripheral nervous system, it comprises of, it generally comprises of all the nerves which are associated with the central nervous system. That is with the brain and the spinal cord. And the nerve fibers of the peripheral nervous system, they are of two types. These are efferent and efferent. Efferent and efferent fibers. The efferent nerve fibers, they transmit impulses from tissues or organs to the central nervous system. And the efferent fibers, they transmit the impulses from the central nervous system to the concerned peripheral tissues or organs. So peripheral nervous system is divided into two main divisions which are called as somatic, and another is autonomic neural system. So when we talk of somatic neural system, It relays impulses from the central nervous system to the skeletal muscles, and the autonomic neural system. And this autonomic neural system, this generally this autonomic nervous system, it generally what it does, it transmits impulses from the central nervous system to the involuntary organs or the smooth muscles of the body. So this autonomic neural system is further divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic divisions. And visceral nervous system is also a part of the peripheral nervous system. When we talk of visceral nervous system, it comprises of the whole complexion of nerves, fibers, ganglia, and where the impulses travel from the central nervous system to the viscera and from the viscera to the central nervous system. Let's talk about the neuron as the structural and functional unit of life. A neuron is a microscopic structure which is composed of three major parts. One is the cell body, dendrite, and these are the dendrites and the axon. So this you have studied in your previous classes also. The cell body contains cytoplasm, cell organelles, and certain granular bodies which are called as Nissls granules. Now these are short fibers, branch, repeated. They project out of the cell body and they contain the Nissl granules as well as the dendrites. So these fibers, they transmit impulses towards the cell body. And the axon is a long fiber, its other end is branched, and each branch transmits a bulb-like structure which is called as the synaptic knob. So here we can find the synaptic knobs are there. They possess synaptic vesicles which contain the chemicals which are called as neurotransmitters. So axons transmit the nerve impulse which is away from the cell body to the synapse or to the neuromuscular junctions. So axons and dendrites, the neurons, they are generally of two types, multipolar with one axon and two or more dendrites. These are found in the cerebral cortex, or the others, they are bipolar with one axon and one dendrite. They are found in the retina of the eye. And the third type are the unipolar, where the cell body where only one axon is found, and they are usually in the embryonic stage. So there are two types of axons. They can be myelinated and non-myelinated also. Myelinated nerve fibers, they have Schwann cells around, which forms a myelin sheath around the axon. So the gaps between the two adjacent myelin sheaths, these are called as nodes of Ranvier. So myelinated nerve fibers, they are found in the spinal and cranial nerves, and unmyelinated nerve fibers which are enclosed by Schwann cells and they does not form a myelin sheath around the axon. They are found in autonomous and the somatic nervous system. So that is all for today. Thank you. So this is the structure of a neuron that we have discussed in the previous presentation. Today we'll start with the generation and conduction of nerve impulse through the axon. We know that neurons, they get excited and their membranes, they are always in a polarized state. Polarized state means two poles, okay, negative or positive. Now why they are in the polarized state? Because the different types of ion channels, they are present in the membrane of the neuron, and these ion channels, they are selectively permeable to different ions. So when a neuron is not conducting any impulse, okay, when it is not conducting any impulse, then at that time they are in the resting stage. So the axonal membrane at that time is more permeable to potassium ions. So we see here these are more permeable to potassium ions in the resting stage, and the axonal membrane, it is more permeable to potassium ions and impermeable to sodium ions. So when the membrane is impermeable to negatively charged proteins which are present in the exoplasm, this is exoplasm inside the axon. So the exoplasm, in the inside of the exoplasm, the axon contains very high concentration of sodium ions. So उस वक्त यहाँ पे sodium ions बहुत ज़्यादा हो जाते हैं, ठीक है? So what will happen then further? So when the potassium ions are very high and negatively charged proteins and low concentration of sodium ion is there inside, So in the fluid outside the axon contains the low concentration of sodium ions. So outside low concentration of sodium ions and inside very high. So high concentration of sodium ions thus form a concentration gradient. So this forms a concentration gradient outside and inside the membrane, and these ionic gradients across the resting membranes, they are maintained by active transport of ions by the sodium potassium pumps. So these are sodium potassium pumps, and they transport 3 sodium ions outside for 2 potassium ions inside. So once this happens, the outer surface of the axonal membrane now possess the positive charge, and the inner surface, now becomes negatively charged, and therefore it is now polarized. So the electrical potential difference across the resting plasma membrane is called as the resting potential. So this is called as the resting potential. So now this mechanism of nerve impulse and its conduction along an axon, when a stimulus is applied to a site, ठीक है, किसी भी site पे जब कोई stimulus apply होता है, so what will happen then? The polarized membrane. So the membrane at site A, we can say that this is site A, suppose. So the membrane at the site A, what will happen further? It becomes freely permeable to sodium ions. And this results in the rapid influx of sodium ions followed by the reversal of the polarity at that stage. So the outer surface of the membrane becomes negatively charged, and the inner side becomes the positively charged. So the polarity of the membrane at a particular site is reversed, and then hence it is called as depolarized. So the electrical potential difference across the membrane at site A is action potential, which is in fact termed as nerve impulse. So this is actually called as nerve impulse, and at sites immediately ahead, the axon, suppose this is site B. So at site B, the membrane has a positive charge. The membrane will have a positive charge at the site B, suppose. The positive charge on the outer surface and negative charge on the inner surface. So इससे क्या होगा? A current flow in the inner surface of the site A to site B. So on the outer surface, the current flows, hence the polarity at the site is reversed and an action potential is generated at the site B. So the impulse or an action potential which is generated at site A, and it arrives at site B. So the impulse or an action potential, it will keep transferring from site A to site B. So this sequence is repeated along the length of the axon and the impulse is conducted. So the rise in the stimulus or permeability to sodium ions, it is very short-lived. Okay, this is generally short-lived for a short period of time, and it is quickly followed by the rise in the permeability to potassium ions. So within a fraction of a second, potassium ions diffuses outside the membrane and restores the resting potential of the membrane at the site of excitation, and the fibers becomes more responsible to further stimulation. So this is how the action potential is generated, first in the resting state, then in the action potential, then at one site and then to the other site B, and the difference in the concentration gradient allows the movement of these ions to move inside or outside, and that generates an action potential in the form of a nerve impulse. Next we study about the transmission of impulse. Nerve impulse, it is transmitted from one neuron to another through the junction which are called as a synapse. A synapse is formed by the membrane of the presynaptic neuron by a gap which is called as synaptic cleft. Now there are two types of synapses, namely electrical synapse and chemical synapse. At electrical synapse, the membranes of the pre and post synaptic neurons, they are very close, and the electric current can flow directly from one neuron to the other across these synapses. So the transmission of an impulse across electrical impulse is very similar to the impulse conduction along a single axon. So impulse transmission in the electrical synapse is always faster than in the chemical form. So at a chemical synapse, the membranes of the synaptic neurons, they are separated by a fluid-filled space which is called as synaptic cleft, and the chemicals called neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters, they are involved in the transmission of impulse of these synapses, and the axon terminals. And the axon terminals, they contain vesicles. These are the vesicles. These vesicles, they are filled with these neurotransmitters. And when an impulse, action or potential arrives at the axon terminal, it stimulates the movement of the synaptic vesicles towards the membrane, where they fuse with the plasma membrane and release the neurotransmitters in the synaptic cleft. You can see it here. Now, these neurotransmitters, they bind to the specific receptors. These are the receptors. They are present on the postsynaptic membrane. So, presynaptic membrane and postsynaptic membrane. And so, this binding opens ion channels and allowing the entry of the ions and generate a new potential in the postsynaptic neuron. So, the new potential which developed, it may be excitatory or it can be inhibitory also. Thank you so much for today.